Welcome to the Enterprise Management course lesson, Introduction to the Department of State Culture. This section, Part 2 of Introduction to DOS Culture, focuses on DOS function and DOS as an organization. Now that you've learned a little about the history of the Department of State, let's now look at the functions of the department today. As the lead foreign affairs agency, the Department of State has the primary role in leading interagency coordination in developing and implementing foreign policy, managing the foreign affairs budget and other foreign affairs resources, leading and coordinating U.S. representation abroad, conveying U.S. foreign policy to foreign governments and international organizations through U.S. embassies and consulates in foreign countries and diplomatic missions to international organizations, conducting negotiations and concluding agreements and treaties on issues ranging from trade to nuclear weapons, coordinating and supporting international activities of other U.S. agencies and officials. The embassy is the most important face of U.S. representation. The embassy plays a chief role in forging relationships with foreign governments, international organizations, businesses, and third parties, with the ultimate goal of furthering U.S. interests in the region. The management of all these relationships is called diplomacy. Diplomacy is the manner in which the State Department formulates, implements, and represents to other nations the foreign policy goals of the President. In fact, the ambassador, who leads the U.S. mission abroad, is the President's spokesman in the country, along with other individuals involved in the U.S. mission. Given the importance of representing the United States abroad, it's important to know what exactly the Department of State does toward that end. Protecting and assisting U.S. citizens living or traveling abroad. Assisting U.S. businesses in the international marketplace. Coordinating and providing support for international activities of other U.S. agencies, local, state, or federal government, official visits overseas and at home, and other diplomatic efforts. Keeping the public informed about U.S. foreign policy and relations with other countries, and providing feedback from the public to administration officials. The U.S. maintains diplomatic relations with 180 of the world's 191 countries, in addition to international organizations. All in all, State represents the U.S. at over 250 posts around the world. U.S. representation abroad takes many forms. Click on the tabs to learn more. The U.S. bilateral representation in foreign countries is known as the diplomatic mission and was established in accordance with the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, of which the U.S. is a signatory. Often, the terms embassy and consulate are used together. However, the two are very different. An embassy is the larger and more important of the two, and is described as a permanent diplomatic mission, which is generally located in a country's capital city. For example, the United States Embassy in Canada is located in Ottawa, Ontario. The embassy is responsible for representing the home country abroad and handling major diplomatic issues, such as preserving the rights of citizens abroad. For the most part, if a country recognizes another as being sovereign, an embassy is established to maintain foreign relations and provide assistance to traveling citizens. A consulate is a smaller version of an embassy and is generally located in the larger tourist cities of a country, but not the capital. In Germany, for instance, the U.S. consulates are in cities like Frankfurt, Hamburg, and Munich, but not in the capital city of Berlin, because the embassy is located in Berlin. Consulates, and their chief diplomat, the consul, handle minor diplomatic issues like issuing visas, aiding in trade relationships, and taking care of migrants, tourists, and expatriates. In addition, the U.S. has virtual presence posts to assist people around the world in learning about the U.S. and the areas in which the VPP is focused. The virtual consulate is a new tool of U.S. diplomacy that enables the U.S. mission to have a presence in regions where there is no consulate or embassy physically located. VPPs do not have permanent offices and staff. Some examples of VPPs include the VPP Santa Cruz in Bolivia, the VPP Nunavut in Canada, and the VPP Chelyabinsk in Russia. There are about 50 total VPPs worldwide. For countries with which the U.S. has no diplomatic relations, the embassy of a friendly country often accepts the duty of watching out for U.S. affairs in the country, and at times houses an interests section staffed with U.S. government employees. Click on the countries below to learn more. Much of the State Department's output defies easy labeling. However, if you have applied for a passport, eaten a banana grown in Honduras, flown a foreign airline, felt safer when foreign governments adopted controls to detect terrorist financing, seen the repatriation of art confiscated by Nazis, taken comfort in new controls on toys and toothpaste from China, or wondered why Amy Winehouse didn't get a visa to the Grammy Awards, then you have encountered diplomacy. These decisions, and thousands that don't merit headlines, were all byproducts of diplomatic engagement. They all, to one extent or another, derive from the much broader goals enunciated in the President's national security strategy. Although the Department of State has the lead to coordinate strategies and actions to implement the President's national security strategy, it works with other agencies to meet this end. Each bureau at the DOS transforms the elements of the NSS into bureau strategic plans, and each embassy further refines these plans into mission strategic plans. Policy runs in a linear fashion from the President down to written or oral instructions to U.S. embassies and missions overseas, or to the U.S. representative to the United Nations in New York. This individual has the rank of a cabinet secretary and works diplomatic issues in that multilateral forum, coordinated with the State Department's Office of International Organizations. Action requests or new regulations are sent to the field via administrative announcements, written memos often referred to as cables. When the DOS seeks to convey U.S. policy or solicit foreign governmental assistance support on an issue, or DOS wants to request alterations to foreign government's actions, DOS sends a démarche or formal approach to that government. The démarche is conveyed in many forms, orally in meetings or written in diplomatic notes or non-papers that are left with the host government. Such engagements can result in bilateral agreements, treaties, or simply agreed courses of action by the U.S. or host country. The chain of command at the Department of State begins with the Secretary of State. In the U.S., the Secretary of State is the highest-ranking member of the Cabinet and fourth in line of presidential succession. The Secretary of State is the principal advisor to the President on foreign policy issues, coordinates foreign policy issues for the U.S. government, including the U.S. mission to the United Nations, the Agency for International Development, and approximately 60 other federal agencies with overseas interests, implements the President's foreign policy decisions and programs, protects U.S. interests and citizens abroad, sends ambassadors abroad. The Deputy Secretary serves as the principal deputy, advisor, and alter ego to the Secretary of State, serves as acting Secretary of State in the Secretary's absence, and assists the Secretary in the formulation and conduct of U.S. foreign policy and in giving general supervision and direction to all elements of the department. There are 6 undersecretaries that report to the Secretary of State. The undersecretaries in turn supervise a number of the bureaus and offices. The undersecretary positions are Political Affairs, Economic Growth, Energy and Environment, Arms Control and International Security Affairs, Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, Management, and Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights. The Assistant Secretary of State manages regional or functional issues for state and report to the respective undersecretary. There are many Assistant Secretaries of State, one over each bureau. Regional bureaus have direct line authority over staffing, funding operations, and advising on foreign assistance for their region, and are the ones that operate and staff DOS missions overseas. Other bureaus manage issues such as counterterrorism, economics, energy, ocean and the environment, legal affairs, political military affairs, public affairs, and international organizations. Desk officers are seen as the backbone of DOS operations. They field complaints, coordinate between U.S. embassies and Washington HQ of the department, and also with respective foreign embassies in Washington, write core action memos on policy, and often serve as note-takers in meetings between foreign governmental officials. Ambassadors are also called Chief of Mission, or COM, not to be confused with Chief of Station, which is the lead CIA representative in country. Ambassadors can come from among the ranks of any of the career tracks, although historically, officers from the Political Affairs section have had greater representation among Chiefs of Mission. State FSOs, Foreign Service Officers, are also assigned as political military officers, labor officers, counter-narcotics officers, and are drawn from the 5 core specialty fields shown to conduct these more specialized missions. Ambassadors are appointed by the President of the United States with the advice and consent of the Senate. Ambassadorial appointments include both career Foreign Service officers, which you will learn more about later, and representatives from the public-private sectors. Over the past several decades, approximately 70% of all ambassadors have been career FSOs. The State Department comprises approximately 57,000 employees. 8,000 are civil service personnel. The State Department also relies heavily on host nation personnel to carry out day-to-day operations. There are approximately 38,000 host nation personnel working for DOS, almost twice the number of civil service and foreign service personnel combined. A common acronym you will run across in dealing with the State Department is FSO, or Foreign Service Officer. There are approximately 11,300 individuals who hold the title FSO, who can be generalists or specialists. There are about 6,500 generalists and 4,800 specialists. FSOs pass extremely competitive exams to enter the State Department, and they are expected to spend approximately 60% of their career overseas. FSOs work in 5 core areas or career tracks within the Department of State. Click on the offices to learn more.
My name is Jane. I'm a consular officer. When I was stationed in Istanbul, Turkey on my second tour, and my boss called me late on a Friday night and asked me if I would be willing to go out to southeast Turkey the following morning to assist an American who was facing deportation. This young American had attempted to board a plane to Istanbul and onward to the United States with an American passport that was completely blank, and unfortunately the young man didn't speak enough English to convince the Turkish immigration police that he was in fact an American citizen. Apparently his father had abducted him from his American mother 13 years before, and fleeing compulsory military service in the country where he was living, he had fled over the border into Turkey seeking to go back to the United States and reunite with his family. My parents had a tremendous amount of personal pride when I was actually selected for the Foreign Service. My name is Heidi, and I'm a U.S. Foreign Service officer working at the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I have also served in El Salvador, China, and Malaysia. I am a daughter of immigrants to the United States, and my family in Honduras had a very rich civic participation ethic. For me to represent their new country overseas was an extraordinary achievement. Sometimes people have this perception that the United States is a very homogenous society, when in reality we are a fusion of cultures. It's intellectually stimulating to be working on issues that show up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. In El Salvador, I was able to help facilitate and moderate a public debate on their economy. I certainly do my best to represent the United States overseas in terms of contributing to changing people's perceptions, not just about the United States, but also about their own societies, to empower people so that they themselves begin to demand more from their political leadership. What you are able to draw from this experience is so rewarding. It really does enrich you as a person.
My name is Wayne, and I'm in the management career track. I was the General Services Officer in Jerusalem. We found out during a celebration that the Prime Minister had been assassinated. The next day, the delegation arrived, headed by the President, several congressmen, the Secretary, and a number of other American dignitaries, and we were impressed in the service to make that American representation at his funeral work. But on that particular day, I think what we needed was steady nerves. We needed to show firm leadership because a lot of people who were involved weren't necessarily aware of the big picture, so we had to keep them in track, keep them involved, and keep them in line.
Hi, I'm Uzra. I'm from the political career track. Well, I think the day that mattered most to me was immediately after the terrorist attacks of September 11th in 2001. I was working in the UN Office of Political Affairs in the State Department, and amid the shock of witnessing the devastation that happened in New York and at the Pentagon, and being concerned for our colleagues and all our fellow Americans, we really had to come together to work as a team to try to respond to this terrible outrage, but also to try to mobilize the international community to come together to unified to fight terrorism. A team of colleagues and I from our office, from offices throughout the department, from legal affairs, from the economic bureau, from bureaus throughout the building, came together to work on a project to see how we could mobilize the United Nations to respond more directly to the threat to international peace and security posed by terrorism. And I was very proud to have been part of a project that came up with the elements for the first binding Security Council resolution against terrorism. That's Resolution 1373.
My name is Tanya, and I'm a Foreign Service Officer in the public diplomacy field. In 1993, I was a brand new Foreign Service Officer in a brand new embassy in a brand new country in Kazakhstan. I accompanied our ambassador along with a couple of other embassy officers to meet with the Kazakhstani side. On their side, the person speaking with us was the foreign minister of the entire country. So we were having this small meeting to discuss the announcement. Therefore, my role, my contribution was supposed to be important. As it happened that day, I had laryngitis. So I had to whisper my contribution to this very important meeting. But in a demonstration of human empathy, all the other participants whispered back, starting with the foreign minister. So we had this long, intense meeting, all in a whisper, and it made the whole thing seem even more secret. In the end, the announcement was covered by the world. It was a big deal. It was probably the height of our relationship, U.S. relationship with Kazakhstan.
FSO specialists are the most common DOS staff that SOF operators will interact with. Specialists are intrinsic members of the diplomatic corps and ensure DOS operations overseas and in the U.S. run smoothly. Diplomatic security runs billion-dollar contracts for embassy security, protects State Department personnel, runs fleets of vehicles, and maintains the highest standards of law enforcement for all state offices overseas. Office management specialists keep DOS posts functioning. With nimble staffing of offices and in-depth training on state procedures, they are the backbone of the operational core. Likewise, given the primacy of information collection and dissemination for foreign policy making, State's information management team is integral and is developing new tools to encourage collaboration and innovation for knowledge management. Specialists play a key role in post-conflict environments, often designing flexible operational concepts to adapt to challenging environments. Congratulations on completing Part 2 of the 3-part DOS culture lesson. In this lesson, you learned about DOS function and DOS as an organization. Close this part of the lesson and complete Part 3 when you are ready.